Welcome to our channel, Hollywood Movie Review. The Drop 2014 Movie Review. The Drop is a 2014 American crime film directed by Michaël Roskam and written by Dennis Lehane, based on his 2009 short story Animal Rescue. It follows Bob Sajanowski, a barman who becomes entangled in an investigation after the mafia-run bar where he works is robbed. It stars Tom Hardy, Noomi Rapace, James Gandolfini in his final film role, and Matthias Schoenaerts. It premiered at the 2014 Toronto International Film Festival and was released theatrically on September 12, 2014, by Fox Searchlight Pictures. It received generally positive reviews and grossed $4.1 million during its opening weekend and $18.9 million worldwide, against a budget of $12.6 million. In Brooklyn, Robert Bob Sajanowski tends a neighborhood bar run by his cousin Marvin Stipler, which the Chechen mafia uses as a drop for illegal money. Marv ridicules Bob for commemorating the 10th anniversary of Richie Glory Days Wayland's unsolved disappearance by giving Wayland's friends a free round of tequila. Bob finds a pit bull pup abandoned in a garbage can outside the home of a woman named Nadia, and they rescue the battered dog together. When the bar is robbed by two masked gunmen, Marv is annoyed when Bob tells NYPD Detective Torres that one robber wore a broken watch. Recognizing Bob from church, Torres questions his reluctance to take communion. Naming the dog Rocco, Bob bonds with Nadia, who offers to care for Rocco when Bob is at work. She later reveals that scars on her neck were self-inflicted when she struggled with drugs. Chechen mobster Chavka Umarov threatens Marv and Bob to recover his stolen money. Meeting with Fitz, one of the thieves, Marv is revealed to have orchestrated the robbery, and a discussion with his sister Dottie reveals that he is desperate to pay for their father's life support. Bob is approached by a man who later appears at his home with proof he is Rocco's owner, but Bob refuses to return the mistreated dog. Marv grows paranoid, and he and Bob find a bag outside the bar containing the stolen money and a severed arm with the broken watch, apparently delivered by the Chechens. Rocco's owner visits the bar, hinting intimate information that he knows Nadia. Marv informs Bob that the man is Eric Deeds, who has long claimed to have killed Richie Wayland. Immediately after disposing of the arm in New York Harbor, Bob is again questioned by Torres. Bob confronts Nadia, who later admits that Deeds is her unstable ex-boyfriend, but Bob assures her that he does not care about her past. Bob and Marv return the money to the Chechens, who tell them that the bar will be the drop site on the night of the Super Bowl. When Fitz refuses to rob the bar again on the night of the drop, Marv kills him and recruits Deeds instead. Soon after, Bob confronts Deeds, who has previously demanded $10,000 in exchange for Rocco. Without payment, he has threatened to reclaim the puppy and kill Bob. Bob also checks in with Marv. Sensing Marv's plan, Bob warns him not to do something desperate again. On the day of the Super Bowl, Marv claims to be ill and takes the day off from work. Bob retrieves cash hidden in his basement and waits for Deeds, who instead breaks into Nadia's home and forces her to go to the bar with him. There, Bob hides his money and a pistol, and receives numerous deposits of illegal cash throughout the night. Marv lines his trunk with plastic and waits near the bar, which is eventually empty except for Deeds and a frightened Nadia, who warns Bob that Deeds has a gun. Bob offers the $10,000 for Rocco, but Deeds refuses it, instead threatening to harm Nadia if Bob does not open the time lock safe. Bob explains that years earlier, Marv was a loan shark skimming money from the Chechens. A customer with a large debt won a casino jackpot and paid Marv everything he owed. Marv seized the opportunity to use the customer's money to cover what he had stolen from the Chechens, ordering Bob to kill the man and dispose of the body. Bob reveals that the man in the story is Richie Glory Days Wayland, countering the rumor that Eric was the one who killed him. Deeds denies Bob's story in an effort to protect his malicious reputation, and Bob mocks him before shooting him dead and disparaging Deeds' character to his expired corpse. A frightened Nadia asks Bob if she can leave, which Bob allows and reassures her that no one will ever hurt her again. The Chechens arrive to dispose of Deeds' body and kill Marv, assuring Bob he is not alone and making him the bar's new manager. Later, Torres offers Bob condolences for Marv's death, unconvinced it was a carjacking gone wrong. Torres asks Bob about Deeds, who has gone missing and was last seen at the bar, just as Wayland has been. Torres reveals that although Deeds took credit for Wayland's death, he was in a psychiatric ward the night Wayland went missing. Torres insinuates that Bob is responsible for both disappearances, whispering in the latter's ear, "No one ever sees you coming, do they, Bob?" Torres then walks away, leaving Bob out of his investigations. Bob visits Nadia with Rocco and asks if he should stay away from her from now on. After hesitating for a moment, Nadia offers to join him on a walk with Rocco. The Drop opened in 809 theaters in North America and grossed $4,104,552, with an average of $5,074 per theater and ranking number 6 at the box office. The film's widest release in the United States was 1,192 theaters, and it ultimately earned $10,724,389 domestically and $7,933,992 internationally, for a total of $18,899,662, above its budget of $12.6 million. The Drop received positive reviews from critics and has a score of 89% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 204 reviews with an average score of 7.10/10. The critical consensus states there's no shortage of similarly themed crime dramas, but The Drop rises above the pack with a smartly written script and strong cast. On Metacritic, it has a score of 69 out of 100 based on 36 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Particular praise was given to the performances of Tom Hardy and James Gandolfini. Film reviewer Mike Dennis, 9, gives it 3.5 out of 4, citing outstanding performances, script, direction, and especially cinematography by Nicholas Karakatsanis, whose bleak rendering of Brooklyn has never been matched. The Drop is just how I like my Tom Hardy, in nearly every scene. His notorious jailbird in Bronson was just too savage. His Batman arch-nemesis Bane in The Dark Knight Rises was too unintelligible. His recent solo tour de force behind the wheel in Locke was too much of a gimmick. And while this terrific British actor purred his way through Inception like a randy tomcat on a hot night, there just wasn't nearly enough of him on screen. Now here comes The Drop, a solid, occasionally gripping crime thriller based on a short story by Dennis Lehane, Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone, making his screenwriting debut, and directed by Belgium's Michaël Roskam, whose unsettling bullhead was a foreign language Oscar nominee. There is a whole lot of Hardy going on, and The Drop is at its best when we can observe how the actor slowly peels away the layers from his character in a finely calibrated performance that builds to a satisfying full reveal in the final act. Hardy's Bob Sajanowski is a dark horse of a Brooklyn bartender who excels at keeping his head down and looking the other way whenever the Chechen mobsters who own the place launder their ill-gotten money by way of a drop at the drinking establishment. This slice of working-class gang life is extra notable as the final film appearance by the late, great James Gandolfini, perfectly fine as Marv, Bob's cousin and boss, who turns out to be the sort of desperate type that Tony Soprano would have had disposed of with nary a blink. But this is Hardy's show all the way, never more so than when he innocently corrects a humorless Marv when he refers to the gangsters as Czechians. As Bob, who knows better than to insult dangerous men, explains, I think it's like how you don't call people from Ireland Irelandians. Quietly compelling can be harder to do than obviously showy, but Hardy handily establishes Bob as a soft-spoken sweetheart early on as he comps shots to the regulars as they salute the anniversary of a friend's passing and allows a lonely old woman to hang out all day on Marv's special bar stool. There is a kind of gentle giant masculinity in Hardy's demeanor, accented by his cuddly cold-weather attire, that recalls the early Sylvester Stallone as Bob dutifully attends Mass and sweeps up after hours. The catalyst for the plot is a late-night visit to the bar by two masked robbers, a heist that proves much more complicated than it first appears. To spill too many beans would spoil what happens, but let's just say the Chechens, who have no qualms about driving around town in their work van while torturing an unlucky associate in the back as blood drips through the floor like leaky motor oil, want the $5,000 that went missing, and they want it now. Soon, Marv is in over his head and resorts to measures that are destined to backfire. Meanwhile, Bob's insular life is turned around when he passes by a garbage can on the way home and hears an animal whimpering inside. Rocky Balboa had his pet turtles, Cuff and Link. And Bob has Rocco, an abused puppy who soon becomes his adorable companion. Make what you will of the fact that the dog is a pit bull, a breed that, rightly or wrongly, has a rep for suddenly turning vicious. But it is curious how Bob always skips the line for communion at church, suggesting that he wants to avoid going to confession. There is also an Adrian counterpart who enters Bob's life in the form of Nadia, Noomi Rapace of Prometheus and the original Swedish version of the girl with the dragon tattoo, who owns the trash container where Rocco was found. A former employee at an animal shelter, she agrees to tutor Bob on how to tend to his new best friend and even offers to dog sit. Soon, he and Nadia start to become close companions as well, although he remains a gentleman throughout their time together. And, soon, he will learn that both she and Rocco used to belong to a one-time psychiatric patient and purported killer named Eric Deeds. Deeds, played by Flemish actor Matthias Schoenaerts, a standout in Bullhead as well as last year's Rustin Bone, who likes to unexpectedly show up at people's houses to get their attention, is determined to get both the pup and Nadia back. As the climax builds to Super Bowl Sunday, when the biggest drop of the year is expected, it becomes clear that Bob, if he wants to assure the safety of Rocco and Nadia as well as hold off the gangsters, will have to make some difficult decisions. Roskam captures the gritty run-of-the-mill milieu, including the cluttered lower-income houses filled with a lifetime of worthless tchotchkes, and knows how to build tension. This is one of those films where you expect the worst to happen around every corner and down every alley. Not everything is perfect with The Drop. There is an on-the-ball detective, John Ortiz, a stage veteran who is Bradley Cooper's friend in Silver Linings Playbook, investigating the robbery, who suspects there is more to Bob and the situation at the bar than meets the eye, but his involvement turns out to be peripheral at best. The terrific and Doubt of TV's The Leftovers barely gets a chance to make an impression as Marv's fed-up sister. And as good as Schoenaerts is, he isn't consistently convincing as an unstable creep. But if you have been itching to witness Hardy at full throttle, here is your chance. The actor should be, by all rights, at the same level by now as Michael Fassbender and Benedict Cumberbatch, two other fantastically talented UK imports who have built up passionate cults in recent years. The Drop is a good start. But let's hope that when Hardy takes his bow as the lead in the resurrected Mad Max Fury Road next May, he will get the full notice and opportunities that he rightly deserves. The Drop is James Gandolfini's last film, and among other things it plays as somewhat of an elegy for the actor who is most known for his iconic mafia boss role in HBO's groundbreaking series The Sopranos. Gandolfini died suddenly from a heart attack at age 51 before the film's release. The character he embodies here is a kind of parallel universe version of Tony Soprano, what he might have been if his life had taken a different twist here or turn there, and if he'd made a few too many mistakes. And the results are quite interesting. Instead of New Jersey, the setting is Brooklyn, New York. And instead of being the powerful head of an organized crime family, Gandolfini here plays cousin Marv Stibler, a former tough guy, loan shark, and bar owner turned burned-out, defeated has-been. It seems that cousin Marv used to be somewhat of a big shot. While still a relatively small-time gangster, he was well-known and respected in the crime-ridden, blue-collar neighborhood where his eponymously named bar Cousin Marv's is located. Then about 10 years ago a tougher, meaner crew moved in, gangsters from Chechnya who leaned on Marv and forced him to give them ownership of his bar, but let him operate it and keep its name. Gandolfini's characterization of Marv is one of the film's best qualities, and reminds us of what a great actor he was. We see echoes of Tony Soprano, yet a wholly different character emerges as well. It's a portrait of a depressed, cynical man who once thought he had it all until he was tested and lost, and now inhabits a sublevel of the criminal underworld. Marv was once his own man, but is now beholden to those who took his former life from him. There are scenes where we see his desperation, such as when the Chechen gangsters visit the bar and Marv behaves in a pathetic, obsequious manner, yet curses them as soon as they leave. He acts as the mere caretaker of the bar, which serves as a drop spot for the Chechens, that is, the location where their criminal affiliates leave their illegal takings for safekeeping, to be collected later, hence the title of the film, though perhaps it's a double entendre also implying a drop in one's position in life. Marv oversees these drops and subsequent pickups by the Chechens but profits little, having been reduced to a largely servile role at the very place that still bears his name, as a constant reminder of his failure. Gandolfini's final scene, and indeed the last time he appears in any role anywhere, serves as an appropriate epitaph to many of the characters he's played. It's kind of a brilliant performance, and a fitting one for Gandolfini given the tough guy/gangster roles he so frequently inhabited. But Cousin Marv is not actually the main character here, which is perhaps also fitting given the status of his life. The lead role is instead given to Tom Hardy as Bob Sajanowski, Cousin Marv's bartender, sidekick, and as it turns out, his actual cousin. Bob seems to not quite have it all upstairs. He speaks slowly and with occasional odd turns of phrase, in a thick, mumbling Brooklyn accent, and takes a little too long to respond sometimes. Yet despite Bob's offbeat demeanor and generally brooding disposition, there's a cool confidence and steadiness of action that emerges, causing us to think that perhaps he is not what he seems. In the last few years, Hardy has achieved regard as one of the greatest actors of his generation, and performances like this show why. The central plotline revolves around a heist at the bar, and it's through this incident that key character traits of Marv and Bob are revealed. Marv keeps his cool during the robbery, while Bob makes a crucial mistake. But details unfold that reveal the depths of Cousin Marv's desperate criminal maneuvering surrounding the whole affair. On the surface, Marv is motivated by money, but perhaps it's something deeper inside of him, an attempt to regain some semblance of the manhood that he's been stripped of, that really drives him. And he's so out of touch that he can't foresee the consequences of his actions, digging himself deeper into largely self-inflicted misery. Perhaps he's just born to lose. Bob, on the other hand, is calm throughout, speaking in low, brief rumblings and with a perpetually furrowed brow. The exact relationship between the two is unclear at first, but as the story progresses there's a kind of shift in dynamic. Marv initially seems to be the one in charge and Bob is clueless. But it's revealed that Bob may have seen the full picture all along while Marv continues down a pitiful path. This is an aspect of the film that makes it an above-average crime drama. Bob, who we initially think is a simple dope, a petty criminal lackey, shows layers of complexity, as does Cousin Marv, as we gradually get details of their backstories juxtaposed with their present behavior. A subplot involves Bob finding a beat-up pit bull puppy in a garbage can outside of a neighborhood woman's house. She's a waitress, Nadia, Noomi Rapace, who's been around the block, with a few large scars on her throat. She doesn't know whose dog it is, and tells Bob that he has to take it because she can't. He's not sure, and takes the prospect of owning and caring for a dog almost too seriously, displaying a childlike sensibility. When Nadia tells Bob that to give the pup to a shelter may result in its adoption by irresponsible owners, Bob decides to keep it, as long as Nadia will help with training it. She agrees, and they become friends. Nadia is damaged, physically and emotionally, and Bob is withdrawn and inarticulate. They're drawn to each other through the dog incident, but more important is what the dog symbolizes, an opportunity to nurture a creature in ways that neither of these two characters have themselves been nurtured. Like Marv and Bob, Nadia's complexity is slowly revealed throughout the film, from initially seeming like a stereotypical woman in distress supporting character to one whose presence is integral to the main narrative. Before long it comes to light that Nadia is not just a random waitress from the neighborhood, but that the appearance of the dog in her trash can is connected to a dangerous, ne'er-do-well ex-boyfriend who also has past ties to Marv's bar. This character, named Eric Deeds, played to creepy low-life perfection by Matthias Schoenaerts, becomes embroiled in the lives of Bob, Nadia, Marv, and the puppy. And it all leads up to a satisfying climax at Cousin Marv's bar on the night of the Super Bowl, the biggest night of the year for the bar's cash drops. There are a few aspects of this film which qualify it as a standard entry into the American crime drama genre, but even more which raise it a bit higher. One of the lesser qualities is the characterization of the Chechen gangsters. They're pretty typical, cookie-cutter badasses, leather jackets, stern expressions, speak little and always with intimidating undertones. And of course, they're foreign. Likewise, there's your usual local cop sniffing around. But among the film's greater qualities is the way that the central characters' struggles, contradictions, and backstories are gradually revealed. This is all done by way of dialogue, never flashbacks, and it rarely seems like tacked-on exposition, but rather natural conversation. Dialogue gems are peppered throughout, such as when Marv refers to the Chechen gangsters as Chechnyans, and Bob corrects him, saying, "You mean Chechens, they're from Chechnya, but they're called Chechens. The Irish are from Ireland, but you don't call them Irelandians." Another dialogue highlight is when Bob and Nadia discuss a name for the dog. Bob says he was thinking of Rocco at first, but later thought Mike would be better. Nadia says that Mike's not a good name for a dog, better go with Rocco. Bob concedes, but says he still doesn't see what's wrong with Mike. In addition to providing some light humor, these dialogue examples also reveal characteristics of the key players, especially Bob. He's simple, sensitive, and thoughtful, like a child. The brilliant Noomi Rapace isn't given a whole lot to do in the supporting role that she inhabits here, but nails every scene she's in, adding another entry into her repertoire of damaged and vulnerable yet simultaneously strong and resilient female characters. She's one of those actresses who seems to be able to cry on a whim. Gandolfini, as mentioned, is excellent in his final role, and Hardy likewise creates another of his strange yet convincing characters. The screenplay is written by Dennis Lehane, adapted from his own short story Animal Rescue. Upon viewing the film, the title of the original work implies more than just saving a castaway puppy, but also perhaps symbolizes the relationship of two people like Bob and Nadia who offer some semblance of solace to each other in the otherwise dark, urban jungle environment populated by criminal animals. The familiar crime film conventions here are elevated to an above-average result overall, by way of competent writing by Lehane and solid direction by Michaël Roskam. Those wanting to see the kind of crime film that features a lot of brutal killings by violent psychopaths might think the film slow and be disappointed. But this one's not like that, it's more character-driven. And therein lies its strength. There is some violence, but when it happens it's for narratively appropriate reasons, and not gratuitous. All too often filmmakers seem to think that crime stories must feature the most flashy, violent killers around in order to be interesting. So it's refreshing to see a movie like The Drop that doesn't rely on that, but rather more so on a sound script and great acting. While not likely to go down as a cinematic masterpiece, The Drop is nonetheless a must-see for fans of the three main actors or of the American crime drama genre. I remember I once saw The Drop many years ago, and I remembered liking it back then. I didn't remember much of it, however, so I had been meaning to see it again. Watching it again I liked it even more, a gritty crime drama, well-paced, written and directed, with a solid cast, that is rather underrated. The Drop is based off a Dennis Lehane short story called Animal Rescue, and he actually adapted his own novel for the big screen, to some great results. It's a good story and script, with some very naturalistic and well-written dialogue. Make no mistake, this is a character-driven story. Despite it being a crime movie, it's not really a thriller, it's actually a bit of a slow burn, but I don't mean that in a bad way by any means. I was personally invested from beginning to end, but just so you know it's not a very active movie, moving at a calm pace. There happens to be some storylines and aspects related to crime, but it's about characters first and foremost. There aren't many moments of violence, but when they are present, they're quite sudden and shocking, and pack the punches that the movie intends them to be. The Drop is an hour and 45 minutes or so long, and that was about the right length of the movie. With it being a slow-paced drama you'd think that it would be rushed or something, but ultimately it's a tightly written movie with a well-handled story overall. The cast are among the best part of The Drop, each of them were great in their respective roles. Tom Hardy gives quite possibly his most subtle performance of his career as a soft-spoken bartender named Bob. I won't reveal too much of the movie, but for at least most of the movie, he's very unassuming, simple and naive, and he absolutely works wonders in this role. Hardy manages to convey so much with just his facial expressions and eyes, it's incredible. Also, if you just want to see a movie where Tom Hardy is taking care of a dog for under a couple of hours, then The Drop is right up your alley. The supporting cast are all good too. Noomi Rapace was good in her part too, and she and Hardy shared convincing chemistry, although she was slightly underused. Notably, The Drop is the last performance from James Gandolfini before his untimely death, and he was really great in his final role. A naturalistic performance with a lot of presence, he too works especially well in the scenes with Hardy. Matthias Schoenaerts is also in a supporting role as someone who threatens Tom Hardy's character. Schoenaerts' character is really meant to be a minor antagonist towards Bob, and as that works as an easy person to dislike. This is the only film I've seen from Michaël Roskam, and he actually directed this movie quite well. The Drop has got quite a great look to it throughout, especially the use of color. The score by Marco Beltrami is also really good. We noticed that The Drop has been overlooked quite a bit, and really deserves a lot more attention than it has been receiving. It's not a particularly fast-paced movie, but instead it's a slow burn and investing drama, with a well-written story, topped off with great performances from Tom Hardy, Noomi Rapace, and James Gandolfini. It's really worth a watch whenever you get a chance. Every reader, and most non-readers, will tell you, there are many more great books than there are great movies. There are several reasons for that. Literature has a serious head start of about 500 years on cinema, for starters. The main reason is that movies are produced to make money, and that novels are, at first, written to tell a story. The gap in expectations often end up creating a gap in quality. In 2014, Alpha Dog storyteller Dennis Lehane got a screenplay of his produced into a feature film and released the novel version simultaneously. If anyone could pull this off, Lehane could. Since I showered the novel with praise last week, I thought it'd be only fair to give the movie, arguably the original output, a shot. The story is essentially the same, down to a couple inane, nitpicky details that vary only slightly. Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, is a lonely bartender, looking for something to hold on to in his life. One night, he finds Puppy bleeding from its forehead in a trash can, meets a girl, Noomi Rapace, and gets what he wishes for. The quiet life of working at his cousin Marv, James Gandolfini, is over as he knows it. They get held up one night. Bob starts getting drop-in visits from a strange, dangerous-looking man, Matthias Schoenaerts, claiming the dog he found is his. Life is going to change for old Bob Sajanowski, and it'll be up to him to dictate if it's going to change for better or worse. So yeah, I've read the novel before watching the movie. It means that everything in this review will be influenced by this choice I've made. The Drop was basically the vision of one man, so it doesn't exactly plays by the rules of Hollywood. Michaël Roskam does an honest job at directing this movie, but his main contribution is not drawing outside the lines. He observes the tone of Dennis Lehane's urban novels and follows the script wherever it takes him. The only aspect of his job that isn't utterly minimalist is the photography, for which I believe natural lighting was used, so in a sense it's minimalistic too, it just has a stronger identity. Of course, Tom Hardy is magnificent as Bob Sajanowski. I believe the stills of Hardy playing Bob came out before the novel was even hinted at, so he's always been the very embodiment of the character. I don't know about you, but I've pictured Hardy as Bob from the get-go when I read the novel, and his actual interpretation is ridiculously seamless. The nice surprises are the European cast, Noomi Rapace and Matthias Schoenaerts, who picked up the Brooklyn accent. I guess this is the main difference with the novel, which is located in a Boston suburb, like it was nothing. Schoenaerts in particular displayed his impressive range by playing a convincing psychopath after nailing the tormented, barely functional heartthrob in the French adaptation of Craig Davidson's Rust and Bone. The $100,000 question here is it worth reading the novel and watching the movie both? It is, but maybe not back-to-back, like I did. Dennis Lehane's writing is so pure and transcendent, it's difficult to compare an actual movie production to the experience of reading one of his novels. The Drop is a tremendous movie in itself, but if you've read the novel beforehand, watch it when you feel like rereading the book, i.e. a couple of weeks/months later, when the details will have faded. A Dennis Lehane movie with a star-studded cast is a wonderful idea, but it still can't quite measure up to his novels. The man is that good with words. The Drop is best enjoyed on its own, or at least slightly removed from any Dennis Lehane reading experiences. Dennis Lehane's crime fiction has been turned into some very successful movies, including Mystic River, Shutter Island, and Gone Baby Gone. But this is arguably the best one, a tough, tense, and entirely absorbing thriller based on a short story of Lehane's entitled Animal Rescue, from the 2009 anthology he edited, Boston Noir. It is a gripping drama, showing how crime is partly a planned and intelligible activity, in which gangsters ruthlessly prosecute clearly defined interests, but also partly random, irrational, and almost arbitrary. Tom Hardy plays Bob, an apparently nice enough guy who works in a bar owned by his glowering and resentful cousin Marv, played by the late James Gandolfini, a semi-retired wise guy now in hock to the scary Chechens, who use his bar as a discreet place to drop packages of mob cash to be collected later. When Bob rescues a pit bull puppy from a trash can outside an apartment belonging to part-time waitress Nadia, Noomi Rapace, this blameless act sets in train actions which will end, of course, in violence. It is not an obvious wrong place wrong time happenstance, more a butterfly wingbeat moment that mysteriously changes Bob's whole life. But it is also a case of bringing about something that was waiting to happen anyway, an inescapable destiny. This is a movie riddled with guilt and fear. Bob is menaced by a cop, Detective Torres, John Ortiz, who recognizes him from the local Catholic church they both attend. Torres upbraids Bob for not taking communion. Is it a cop ploy? Or the genuine indignation of a co-religionist? The title implies a hellish descent. The Drop is one of the smaller films I've been looking forward to for quite a while now. It's a crime drama starring Tom Hardy, Inception, The Dark Knight Rises, Locke, and James Gandolfini, The Sopranos, with a screenplay written by author Dennis Lehane, Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone. With an amazing trailer and largely positive reviews, you've got a winner, right? But after seeing it, I was completely underwhelmed. Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, works at a bar that Brooklyn's mobsters used as a drop-off for their money. When some of that money is stolen, Bob becomes embroiled in the criminal underworld that he worked so hard to avoid. Just as I expected, Tom Hardy and James Gandolfini are absolutely fantastic. Ever since his star turn in Bronson, Hardy proves again and again that he is the real deal. The Drop just offers further proof of that. He plays a guy who's meek and unassuming, but every moment he is on screen he completely absorbs you with the sheer power of his talent. Also, James Gandolfini delivers his last performance with such charisma that you're whisked back to the glory days of Tony Soprano and left in awe of how talented he was. A fine job to go out on. The Drop also does a good job at handling its tone. As per Lehane tradition, it's got a very dark, downbeat story, and you feel the sense of foreboding dread throughout. You know from the first scene that this side of Brooklyn is not a nice place, and the movie sticks to its guns and makes itself a dark descent into Bob's personal hell. But there are also some nice touches of dark humor, usually supplied by the remarkably deadpan Gandolfini. But even with all these good things, it seems Lehane and director Michaël Roskam forgot to add good storytelling. This is a movie where the basic story could have been a strong one, but the way it was told didn't work. A lot of this comes down to pacing. It was slower than it needed to be, with long stretches of the movie leaving me waiting for something to happen. The movie also has some skewed priorities, focusing too much on the more mundane aspects of the story, leaving the plot very sluggish and meandering. I'm not joking when I say that in this crime drama about dirty money, there's probably just as much emphasis on Bob's paranoia about his new dog being taken away. I desperately wanted to like The Drop, and there were definitely some good qualities, especially the performances by the two lead, but poor storytelling and arthritic pacing bogged them down. It's definitely my least favorite Dennis Lehane adaptation to date, and I believe he should stick to writing books. Still, Tom Hardy's such a good actor that he makes the film bearable. The Drop focuses on the quiet-mannered Bob Sajanowski, Hardy, as he works at his cousin Marv's, Gandolfini, bar. The location is also a drop spot for local Brooklyn gangsters to launder their illegal earnings. When a robbery goes wrong and $5,000 turn up missing, Bob and Marv will dodge the local gangsters who will come looking for their money. They will also have to deal with the police as they investigate the case and learn that finding evidence in a neighborhood that understands the value of silence will be more than difficult. The lonely bartender will find solace in a stray puppy and the surprising company of a young woman named Noomi Rapace, who turns out has just as many demons in her closet as Bob does. Before breaking down my thoughts on this film, I will start by mentioning this was the last film James Gandolfini starred in prior to this unfortunate death. It will be sad to see him go, and his performance in this one is a stark reminder that Hollywood lost a talented actor with his passing. Like his portrayal of Tony Soprano for so many years, his performance as Cousin Marv in this film was a textbook example of what Gandolfini was so great at, character acting. With his delivery of the dialogue and his conveyance of tone and emotion through sheer facial expressions alone, his performance made this film even more intriguing than it already was. Tom Hardy and Noomi Rapace were good in this film. Hardy was able to deliver the persona needed for the character. With his delivery you get an odd sense that never is he scared of a moment, but he almost has like a numbness to the life he lives and the neighborhood he has grown up in. All along you can feel there is much more behind his character than the film is letting on, and watching the course of the storyline to see when it will be revealed adds a great amount of captivating enjoyment. Rapace was solid as the female lead, and with her hesitant delivery and shy approach to the dialogue you can feel her character is a cautious and emotional broken woman who still is bound by her internal strength. She conveys the "I'm not happy but will live on" vibe the script gives her character, and together with Hardy their awkward interactions feel realistic and clearly show some great chemistry. The script is excellent. While many will expect a more visceral action film out of this one, the tone is much more of a dramatic story of the human conscience and life in the neighborhood. This was a great crime drama that captured the underworkings of many cities and the struggle of living a good life without having your hand in something. The script focuses on the dialogue and intention, with the cast having a clear vision of what director Michaël Roskam wanted in tone. This helped in the story being able to build intrigue and tension with their performances and not a lot of the usual film gusto. As the film progresses, your attention is held as most scenes of conversation among the characters mean something for building the course of the storyline, the development of the characters as well as the setting of the region and its current socio-economic status. The cold winter season also adds to the dreary backdrop of the film's location and mixes well to the personality of the characters. The cinematography is well done and keeps it simple without trying to overdo anything. The moments of violence are well shot and capture the gritty feel the story holds throughout. Overall, this was a solid film, and for fans of a good crime drama, this one will not disappoint. It is not fast-paced and did have some lulls, but it was worth it to have the script build some strong tension to pay off with an eloquently subtle third-act reveal. The plot twist doesn't force it and results in an entertaining tale of street crime and the ease of which you can get wrapped up in it. Michaël Roskam directed the Oscar-nominated, foreign-language film Bullhead. It was a great, Belgian crime drama that explored an illegal organization not often explored, with a really compelling protagonist in the center with better realized side characters. It was well photographed with striking visuals and interesting camera work. It somehow managed to be fresh and shocking, delving into issues of masculinity in bold ways. This film tries to be the same, treads on similar ground or hits familiar beats to that one, except it's ultimately weaker across the board. It's like a watered-down version of Bullhead. Tom Hardy, Inception and The Dark Knight Rises, stars as Bob Sajanowski, a bartender at a Brooklyn bar that has become a repository for the money of mobsters. The bar acts like an underground bank or holding spot for dirty cash. The bar is run by Bob's older cousin Marv, played by James Gandolfini in his final film performance, but Bob is Marv's right hand. One night, on his way home, Bob finds a pit bull puppy in a trash can. The trash can is in front of the home of Nadia, a waitress, played by Noomi Rapace, the girl with a dragon tattoo and Prometheus. The puppy is bruised and bleeding. At first, Bob doesn't know what to do with the puppy, but Nadia pushes him to nursing it back to health. Even though the inciting incident is the bar being robbed of its drug money, much like Killing Them Softly, 2012, that incident is only incidental. It almost rises to the point of not mattering. It gives Gandolfini something to do, but the robbery ultimately is swept away. The true center is Bob's care for the dog, which he names Rocco, as well as his budding romance with Nadia. Yet, all through this film, something is off about Bob. He seems somewhat antisocial, or at least socially awkward. Despite looking like he's in his late 20s and early 30s, he seems to have no idea how to talk nor woo a woman. To Nadia, this might be adorable, especially when Bob is holding the cute puppy, making him cuter than he already is. Yet, the writer Dennis Lehane, adapting his own short story, doesn't do much to build the relationship between the two. They don't really talk. It comes as a bit of a surprise when Nadia's ex-boyfriend and ex-con Eric Deeds, played by Matthias Schoenaerts, Bullhead and Rust and Bone, shows up and is the true owner of the dog. Eric is just ridiculous and crazy. He is perhaps the least nuanced and least sane character that Schoenaerts has played. As such, his fate is pretty obvious. It's practically the same fate as Schoenaerts' previous, English-language character in Blood Ties. Yet, Eric's struggle with Bob is all over a dog, and it's simply silly. The real stakes are the thousands of dollars stolen in the inciting incident, but that becomes even lower than an undercurrent. Ostensibly, Bob is all about the dog. The money wasn't a concern for him, and while he comes across as a nice guy, as the film goes along, it becomes clear that something is bubbling underneath his surface. When increasing threats from Chechen mobsters become apparent with blood and severed limbs popping up, Bob remains cool, calm and unaffected. One wonders how he could be so collected or seemingly naive to the danger and weirdness. Then, it's explained in an explosive moment. The final scene then has Nadia make a choice about the explosion she's witnessed, and her decision undermines her character. She basically makes the choice to love the bomb. Yes, in this case, Bob is the bomb, and there's no real reason why she chooses him. Perhaps, it's because he was nice to a dog. Well, Hitler was supposedly nice to his dog. Set in a cold, dark Brooklyn, Michael Roskam's gangster drama, The Drop, follows Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, a lonely bartender of a drop bar used by a Chechen mobster to funnel money to local gangsters. When the bar is robbed of several thousand of the mob's money, and Bob unwittingly gives an investigator more information than the mob and his cousin Marvin, James Gandolfini, are comfortable with, tensions rise and Bob is forced to become more involved in what goes on under the table than he'd like. More than anything, The Drop thrives in subtleties. A slow-burning plot reveals itself through details in the expertly written dialogue, and if you're not paying attention, these whispers of narrative will leave you behind without so much as a glance back. Yet, this also makes The Drop one of the most satisfying films of the year. Understated to a T, the film communicates much of its story through its silent imagery, seemingly throwaway dialogue, and nuanced facial expressions, which for Hardy, who can say more with a blank face than any actor I can think of, the emphasis on the unsaid works beautifully. Like the drop bar itself, there is always much more going on beneath the surface. Early on in the movie, we're introduced to the gentle giant Bob when he finds an abused pit bull puppy in a trash can outside the home of Nadia, Noomi Rapace, a defensive woman who gets involved with Bob when he asks her to teach him how to take care of it. Bob forms a close bond with the puppy and soon attracts the attention of the dog's previous owner, a psychopath named Eric Deeds, Matthias Schoenaerts, who has more to do in the story than simply trying to retrieve his dog back. While The Drop's plot may be modest in scope compared to most in the gangster noir genre, the film provides richness through Hardy and Gandolfini's superb acting, and the sheer level of character depth, which is impressive given that hardly any background information is given about the characters. Yet, that's where The Drop succeeds so well, and where it pays off big time in the climax. It takes the little, unassuming details of a character's quirks and paints landscapes with it, reminding us in the end that nothing about us is as inconsequential as it seems. In The Drop, Tom Hardy offers a subdued performance as a bartender in a two-bit dive that gets held up by crooks who apparently don't realize that they're stealing mob money. The subsequent investigation slowly stirs up old neighborhood stories and tragic secrets. Hardy's Bob Sajanowski is an area lifer. He and his cousin Marv, James Gandolfini in his final film, Run the Joint, which Marv owned a long ways back and that still bears his name. Marv isn't a terribly nice guy, he's a bitter roughneck who apparently frittered away his beloved bar thanks to gambling debts. Bob, on the other hand, seems to be almost a cipher to the regulars, a guy from the old neighborhood who never made much of himself. He says little and doesn't drink with his customers. He keeps his nose clean. Renting blockbuster movies one evening, Bob hears sounds emanating from a trash can in front of a house. Inside's a puppy, which Bob mistakes for a boxer. It's a pit bull. The lady who owns the house, one Nadia, Noomi Rapace, helps Bob clean up the dog and then obtain food, toys, and accessories for its upkeep. In a separate, but oh so connected, thread, Marv and the mob are embroiled in the mystery of who jacked the bar, where the money is, why was the bar robbed, and so on. This is a Dennis Lehane movie. He adapted the screenplay from his short story, Animal Rescue, but now the setting is New York instead of Boston. There's a distinct noir feel to it, and had The Drop been a low-budget, bare-bones movie, it may have been more effective of a film. There's plenty of moral ambiguity afoot and much for the viewer to discover, too. Gandolfini and Rapace offer award-caliber performances, although the latter isn't given much to do other than act as a romantic foil for Bob and be someone he feels protective of, protective from their mutual enemy, one Eric Deeds, Matthias Schoenaerts, a mentally ill hood of some repute who not only claims to be the owner of the dog stashed in the trash but is also Nadia's ex-boyfriend. Small world. Some might call Hardy's performance restrained or minimalist. And it's true that sometimes less is more. Bob is a knowable unknowable, a man profoundly affected by the past and doomed to float through the present. He's tougher than he appears, mentally and physically, and his taciturn nature belies the intellect of a man who is familiar with playing angles and protecting himself. Hardy's Bob has much more in common with Bartleby's Scrivener than Pacino's Scarface. With a mumbled delivery and a slight shuffle limp, Bob gives a non-threatening appearance, sort of a slurring Roger verbal kint. Trust is a major theme in The Drop. Nadia, an archetype for the surviving, put-upon femme fatale, is reluctant to trust Bob after her experiences with Eric. Bob, who knows more than he should, knows he can't fully trust Marv, certain that his cousin would attempt any harebrained scheme for a possible positive payoff. Marv, a seasoned, battle-hardened loser himself, puts so little trust in others that he works on as many double and triple crosses as he can. Lots of balls in the air with this one. I found the scene in which Nadia and Bob meet cute to be a little puzzling. Bob hears the dog whining from within one of Nadia's trash cans, which are inside her chain link fence. She comes out and, after they bring the dog inside and clean him up, she practically forces the pup on Bob, telling him he's Bob's responsibility. This doesn't quite make sense and seems to be in the script solely so Nadia and Bob could have more to do with each other. Bringing men and women together is one of the main purposes of puppies in movies. In another later in the movie, Nadia and Bob are walking his dog in the park. Nadia excuses herself for a moment, and that gives Eric Dietz the opportunity to meet Bob for the first time, complimenting him on the dog. Why does Nadia temporarily leave? Apparently because the plot required Eric and Bob to encounter each other, and nothing more. Some viewers might see The Drop as a gritty, no-nonsense crime thriller that makes use of violence only sparingly, electing the nuance of silence over bloodletting. Others may believe that it's a little too minimalist. When the canvas is empty, we wind up projecting what we want onto it. That is, there's no there isn't enough in Bob's words or action to warrant a further look, and even the reveal at the end isn't enough to lift the movie out of its, sometimes, logically challenged doldrums. Reading film reviews in the seedy underworld of Brooklyn, Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, lives a rather mundane existence working at Cousin Marv's, a dive bar that is run by his actual cousin, James Gandolfini, from whom it takes its name. The neighborhood hangout also happens to be the drop spot for mob money, and both Bob and Marv keep their heads down as they work the arrangement. Bob is more accepting of it than his cousin, who seethes with frustration over being displaced. His glory days as a neighborhood heavy behind him, he still yearns for what was. In the bitter cold of Christmastime's afterglow, Bob's daily routine is shaken by two events. He discovers and rescues an abused pit bull puppy that's been abandoned in a garbage can, and the bar is robbed at gunpoint. What follows is a twisty crime story that plays things close to the vest. Michael Roskam's direction is subtle, and the bleak dreariness of winter provides the appropriate aesthetic for gritty drama. Despite a leisurely pace, The Drop avoids tediousness, and that is due to the intriguing nature of its characters, namely Bob. He is a straightforward working man with a foreshadowed past, an enigmatic bearing, and an unshakable air of mystery. Having the tremendous talent of its cast is the key component that pushes the movie past the reach of similar fare. Tom Hardy dominates the screen with a multifaceted performance that makes Bob just as ordinarily believable as he is dynamic. Carrying films with few words and subtle expressions is one of Hardy's many strong points, and his work here proves no exception. Squaring off against Hardy's Bob is Eric, the pit bull puppy's deranged former owner, played by Matthias Schoenaerts. Schoenaerts brings a subdued volatility to the intimidating and unhinged Eric, charging the film with a significant portion of its unpredictability. As Bob and Eric face off in countless showdowns, both Hardy and Schoenaerts hold their own against each other, and with neither actor backing down, there's an added tension to the underlying question of which character will come out on top. In his final film role, Gandolfini turns in an exceptional performance that is punctuated with equal parts gruff humor and fearsome determination. While Noomi Rapace crackles with sincerity as Bob's love interest, the hardened yet tender Nadia. The Drop offers a puzzle that's pieces are interspersed throughout the narrative and far from hand-fed to its audience. What it says without blunt force dialogue goes further than loquacious monologues could. For instance, the subtle analogy of Rocco is especially gripping with its understated nuance. Staying realistic with its denouements, it sacrifices some steam by not offering at least one major physical altercation between its characters. Underneath all of the bravado and poker stares, a fight seems an inevitable conclusion to draw, and the lack of one comes off as stilted. Without a release, all of that particular build-up ends up having nowhere to go, which is initially frustrating. Clever writing and a sharp execution manages to overcome this weakness. Touching on the nerve shared by the contemplative dramas of the 70s and 80s, it stews with a brooding that avoids outlandish shocks. Electrifyingly poised, The Drop lurks with a quietness that doesn't announce its intention, taking a bigger bite as a result. As viewers navigate its variously concealed compartments, they are given much more to explore long after the credits roll. Rating: The task of conjuring up a blue-collar Brooklyn is taken on by a Belgian director and a British star in this Dennis Lehane-penned drama that also sees James Gandolfini's last big-screen appearance. The Drop is the name given to a bar that, on a given night and that night only, becomes the depositing bank for cash of ill repute. Marv's Bar is one such place, run by cousin Marv, Gandolfini, but owned by ruthless Chechens ever since Marv lost control of his gambling debts. Alongside Marv behind the bar is his own cousin, Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, a taciturn stalwart. Bob religiously attends the 8 a.m. Mass at St. Dom's and, therefore, is a magnet for trouble. Directed by Michaël Roskam, who came to fame with the visceral Belgian drama Bullhead, The Drop shares the same sang-froid. People living out hard-scrabble lives endure traumatic events, but take in their stride. And if they're not enduring, they're perpetrating. Cousin Marv has a foot in both camps. Not Gandolfini's most memorable character, but an echo of him, Mickey is Tony Soprano but browbeaten and more than a little bitter. If you want a final Gandolfini performance to remember him by, last year's Enough Said is a better choice. The energy in the movie comes from Mickey and Bob's adversaries. Firstly, there's Detective Torres, John Ortiz, a classic Columbo type, always playing innocent with a look of childish bemusement on his face. Secondly, and lifting the drama whenever he appears, is Matthias Schoenaerts as Eric Deeds. Roski's lead in Bullhead, and subsequently the breakout star of Jacques Audiard's Rust and Bone, Schoenaerts fills Deeds to the brim with moxie. Every time he appears, usually to confront Bob, usually about a dog, there's a sense that anything could happen, most likely violence, but perhaps a theatrical flourish with an umbrella. Simply speaking, Eric Deeds is the Joker in a shell suit. Bob, meanwhile, is the heart of the drama and, as such, is the key to the film ultimately being a disappointment. Both idiot savant and cool hand Luke, Bob is a combination that never quite convinces. He may be indefatigable, but it's hard to tell what, if anything, gets him animated. His romance with Noomi Rapace Nadia is pretty tepid too, their two hearts too innocent and open for the hard-knock lives they both have led. Lehane, the hard-boiled master, has almost gone soft here. It's not so much in the tale, there's enough blood and a brutal final twist to take care of that. But it's in the drawing of his Brooklyn, where men are men and your word is your word and nobody, but nobody, messes with your local, that it all comes off a tad sentimental. Only in a brief piece of interpolice exposition, ever since the cuts we've given up on cases like this, do we get a sense that this is a contemporary drama and not one more suited to the time of Kojak. You could argue there's another detail of contemporary Brooklyn that's missing too. Never mind the drop bars, where are the organic cupcake shops? Lehane, the hard-boiled master, has almost gone soft here. It's not so much in the tale, there's enough blood and a brutal final twist to take care of that. But it's in the drawing of his Brooklyn, where men are men and your word is your word and nobody, but nobody, messes with your local, that it all comes off a tad sentimental. Only in a brief piece of interpolice exposition, ever since the cuts we've given up on cases like this, do we get a sense that this is a contemporary drama and not one more suited to the time of Kojak. You could argue there's another detail of contemporary Brooklyn that's missing too. Never mind the drop bars, where are the organic cupcake shops? Lehane projects often attract the cream of the crop in directing talent and The Drop is no exception, with Belgian filmmaker Michaël Roskam, the foreign-language Oscar-nominated crime drama Bullhead, serving at the helm. Here, Roskam delivers a slow-burn affair that favors mood and character development over action, creating a drama that tonally recalls the disaffected vibe of 1970s cinema. Think of the films by directors Martin Scorsese and Sidney Lumet that were released during that decade. As such, filmgoers who are intrigued by The Drop should keep in mind, this is a crime movie that's far more drama than thriller. Roskam's approach uses simpler visual symbolism over stylistic flourishes, as well as quiet storytelling over melodramatic plot developments, allowing the moments of intensity or sudden violence to pack all the stronger an emotional punch for it. Combined with Lehane's tightly constructed script, which never meanders nor includes scenes that aren't necessary from a character-building standpoint, Roskam's direction allows the film to work as an effective crime tale with a decent moral core. The Drop is ultimately a solid mood piece, with strong performances that help elevate it above its derivative story elements. Lehane projects often attract the cream of the crop in directing talent and The Drop is no exception, with Belgian filmmaker Michaël Roskam, the foreign-language Oscar-nominated crime drama Bullhead, serving at the helm. Here, Roskam delivers a slow-burn affair that favors mood and character development over action, creating a drama that tonally recalls the disaffected vibe of 1970s cinema. Think of the films by directors Martin Scorsese and Sidney Lumet that were released during that decade. As such, filmgoers who are intrigued by The Drop should keep in mind, this is a crime movie that's far more drama than thriller. Roskam's approach uses simpler visual symbolism over stylistic flourishes, as well as quiet storytelling over melodramatic plot developments, allowing the moments of intensity or sudden violence to pack all the stronger an emotional punch for it. Combined with Lahane's tightly constructed script, which never meanders nor includes scenes that aren't necessary from a character-building standpoint, Roskam's direction allows the film to work as an effective crime tale with a decent moral core. The Drop is ultimately a solid mood piece, with strong performances that help elevate it above its derivative story elements. Hardy delivers yet another excellent performance as Bob, offering a portrait of a man who seems kind and lonely on the surface, yet often leaves you with the sense that there's something dark and dangerous bubbling on the inside. He is a psychologically complex protagonist, for sure, and Roskam's usage of simple visual cues only further enhances that uneasy sense that Bob could, at the turn of a hat, become something very different than a gentleman who rescues injured puppies. Gandolfini, in his final movie role, is compelling as ever, playing Cousin Marv in The Drop. At first, the character appears to be another variation on the late actor's famous Sopranos persona, yet as more is revealed about just what kind of person Marv truly is, Gandolfini continues to add more vulnerability and nuance to his performance. The same holds true for Matthias Schoenaerts, who also worked on Bullhead with Roskam, as Eric Deeds, a man who is clearly unstable and dangerous, yet, thanks to the way that Schoenaerts plays the character, it's often difficult to nail down exactly what kind of threat Eric presents, which makes him all the more interesting to watch in the film. Rapace's Nadia is another strong link in the chain of performances offered by The Drop. Her portrayal of a person who is kind and thoughtful, yet clearly has a troubled past, is convincing and moving, despite the character not having much of an arc in the film. John Ortiz, Silver Linings Playbook, as Detective Torres, also remains fairly static throughout the movie's running time, but Ortiz does fine work playing the streetwise, yet pushy, cop archetype, and, at the end of the day, the character serves his purpose in the overarching narrative well enough. The Drop, on the whole, is yet another fine addition to the growing collection of crime drama films that originated with the literature of Dennis Lehane. Its biggest shortcomings are, put simply, that it doesn't break much new ground in terms of the genre, and that it may be a bit too contemplative and character-oriented for a number of filmgoers, meaning, they'll just find it boring. However, if a slow-burn, well-acted, and mood-heavy adult drama sounds like your cup of tea, then you might want to give this one a look. The Drop is a slow-burning crime drama released in 2014, directed by Michaël Roskam and based on a short story by Dennis Lehane, who also penned the screenplay. The film is set in the gritty neighborhoods of Brooklyn and delivers a tense, atmospheric exploration of loneliness, moral ambiguity, and the lurking violence beneath ordinary lives. Starring Tom Hardy, James Gandolfini, in his final film role, and Noomi Rapace, The Drop is more than a mob story, it's a character study wrapped in a criminal underworld, layered with tension and subtlety. Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, is a quiet, seemingly unremarkable bartender who works at Cousin Marv's bar, owned by his cousin Marv, James Gandolfini. Though Marv once ran the joint, it's now under control of the Chechen mob, who use it as one of many drop bars, locations where illicit money is funneled through on designated nights. Bob keeps his head down and plays the part of a passive observer. But we quickly sense there's more going on beneath his stoic exterior. One evening, Bob discovers a battered pit bull puppy abandoned in a trash can outside the home of a woman named Nadia, Noomi Rapace. The two bond over rescuing the dog, who Bob names Rocco. A hesitant romantic connection begins to form, though it's shadowed by Nadia's troubled past. Soon, a dangerous figure from Nadia's life, Eric Deeds, shows up. He claims to be Rocco's original owner and begins threatening Bob. Eric has a reputation, he's unstable, menacing, and rumored to have killed a man named Richie Glory Days Whalen, an unsolved crime that looms over the neighborhood. The bar gets robbed by two masked men. The Chechens are not pleased, and Marv and Bob come under pressure to find out who is behind it. It's later revealed that Marv himself orchestrated the robbery, hoping to recover some control and money lost when he was muscled out by the mob. He's feeling powerless and bitter, a once feared man now operating under criminal landlords. Bob, however, begins to demonstrate that he is not as naive as he seems. He keeps his emotions controlled, even as he finds himself entangled in an escalating situation involving Marv, the Chechens, Eric Deeds, and the upcoming Super Bowl night, when their bar is scheduled to be the main drop location for millions of dollars in mob money. The climax takes place on Super Bowl night. Tensions hit a boiling point as Eric Deeds arrives at the bar after hours. He demands money from Bob and attempts to force him into submission, even threatening Nadia, who he has tied up and brought along to a quiet but chilling reveal. Bob discloses that he was the one who killed Richie Whalen years ago, not Deeds. He was ordered to do it by the Chechens, and he did so without hesitation. This revelation recontextualizes everything. Bob is not merely a bystander or gentle soul, but someone capable of lethal violence, kept just beneath the surface. He's been underestimated by everyone, including the audience. He then calmly pulls a gun and shoots Deeds dead in the bar. The Chechens clean up the mess efficiently, reassured that their drop money is intact and their interests are safe. They now fully trust Bob, who has proven his loyalty and reliability in the most brutal way. In the aftermath, Marv is quietly eliminated by the mob, an implied, almost off-screen resolution for his betrayal. Nadia, though shaken by what Bob has done, sees the truth. While he is dangerous, he's also honest in a way that most people around her aren't. In the final scenes, Bob takes Rocco for a walk, and Nadia cautiously approaches, hinting that she may still want to be part of his life. "I've not been out this week. Mainly to do with rain. It's been torrential in the UK, and I just not when I say the garden is like a rainforest, but also because I've felt a bit withdrawn, anxiety playing round the edges, and my brain being a bit off kilter. Say cool. My writing has kept me busy. I passed the 55K mark the other day on the WAP, and, when I've not been writing, I've been watching films mainly. Favorites that are easy to watch and don't tax my brain. I know them off by heart, so when my brain wanders off and then later returns I can still follow the film, but also some new ones that I've not seen before. But it's one of the new ones, for me, that I want to talk about now. I know it's not new. Indeed, 2014 makes it quite old now, but it's new to me, and I thought it was wonderful. From the cinematography, a bleak Brooklyn setting, casting, dialogue, beautiful writing, characters, and a clever interplay of storylines, everything was perfect. I tried to never give too much away in reviews because I think that's most unfair, but I mistakenly thought I was about to watch a gangster movie, another one out of a mold of many. Sure, crime plays an important role, but the story itself is character-driven, and every character and setting close to the solitary, daily life of a socially awkward, possibly simple, Brooklyn bartender Bob Sajanowski, played by Tom Hardy, is important. This includes everyone: the dog, his love interest, her ex, his cousins, the detective, church, men at the bar, an old lady he buys drinks for, because it builds up the sensitivity of the character against the backdrop of a cruel and violent world within which the bar he works at operates. His is a lonely life, gentle and unassuming, one as follows a routine within which he seems able to function. It also serves to heighten a dramatic turn of which I will say nothing. You'll have to watch to see that. The Drop is also notable for being the final film role of James Gandolfini, and that too is a reason to watch. In this he plays the self-centered bar owner, Cousin Marv, a man whose greed trumps all, a brilliant foil to Tom Hardy's Bob. But so too are there other characters whose involvement and dialogue within the story is wonderful. For me it was Noomi Rapace as Nadia Dunn, Matthias Schoenaerts as Eric Deeds, and John Ortiz as Detective Evander Torres, who had me mesmerized with their performances. The slick opening scene of The Drop shows the title in action. It refers to the way dirty money is moved around New York, ending its life each night at a random bar, nominated by the mob who will collect the cash. Bullhead director Michaël Roskam, taking charge of his first English-language feature, tells us the score quick and fast, showing money slipping from hand to hand and finally into a slot in the back of a Brooklyn bar, ready for collection. But though the scene is set for a thriller romp, Dennis Lehane, adapting his first screenplay from his short story Animal Rescue, is less interested in crime than those who commit it, and the film quickly morphs into a character study with criminal underpinnings set firmly within the blue-collar world. This is old-school Brooklyn, firmly shorn of hipsters and coffee joints. The chief character in question is Bob, Tom Hardy, a lovable chunk of barman and a soft-spoken blend into the background sort, who attends Mass daily but, ambiguously, never takes communion. He works for his cousin Marv, James Gandolfini, a bitter not-so-wise guy, who harbors a festering resentment over the fact that Chechen gangs now rule his roost. Despite the reheated mob shenanigans and an early robbery at Marv's place, the chief drivers here are a puppy in peril rescued one night by Bob from a dustbin in a move that sees him strike up a relationship with waitress Nadia, Noomi Rapace, and Bob himself. The plot settles to a gentle simmer at this point and at times threatens to come off the boil completely. But the towering presence of Hardy holds the attention, despite the fact that nothing except some man-slash-dog and man-slash-woman bonding is going on. He may have the beefed-up body of a bouncer, but Hardy continually emphasizes Bob's softer, hesitant side, his body language screaming flight even though he is built to fight. His mystery is key to the pull of the piece, as his history is gradually revealed. Gandolfini, meanwhile, sinks into Marv, giving his put-upon bar owner an off-kilter mix of deadpan fatalism and an air of veiled threat, a reminder, if we needed it, of what a tremendously versatile actor we lost when he died in 2013. Roskam, for his part, demonstrates excellent screen shorthand, with the sight of an umbrella protruding from the bars of a cage every bit as disturbing as a severed foot wrapped in cling film. In the final third, the plot begins to kick in as a threat from Nadia's past, her volatile ex Eric, Matthias Schoenaerts, menaces Bob over claims that the pup is matched by clear and present danger caused by the robbery. The emotional notes remain obviously manipulative, with animals in peril always destined to tug at the heartstrings, and the role of Nadia feels flimsy by comparison to the men of the piece, more there as a way of causing conflict between Eric and Bob than as a character in her own right. This is not Rapace's fault, her playing a wounded woman credentials are second to none, but her character never moves beyond being, like the pup, a pawn in the game. In the end, it's Bob the barman and the chance to hear his story that keep you at the bar. In his English-language directorial debut, Belgian Helmer Michaël or Roskam, Bullhead, tackles much-adapted author Dennis Lehane in a simple, moody crime drama set on the mean streets. Lehane's short story source Animal Rescue took place in Boston, just as his Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone, and Shutter Island did. But The Drop, as it has been thankfully renamed, has moved from Dorchester to Brooklyn, where the city's setting plays less of a role than the rich characterizations delivered by the excellent cast. Beyond housing the late James Gandolfini's final screen performance, the film serves as another reminder of Tom Hardy's vast range. And here, Hardy delivers another performance like those in Warrior or Lawless, where he disappears into his character's sensitivity and inner complexities, while fine players, including Noomi Rapace and Matthias Schoenaerts, support him. Lehane adapts and expands his own story that centers on a tavern called Cousin Marv's, where Bob Sajanowski, Hardy, a soft-spoken, working-class guy, tends the bar. Marv, Gandolfini, used to own the place, but he's just an unenthusiastic figurehead now since it was taken over by Chechen mobsters, who use this and other watering holes throughout the city as one-night-only depositories known as drop bars. On any given night, Cousin Marv's might be chosen, and throughout the evening, shady men carrying thick envelopes of cash, collected for any number of illicit deeds, pass along the parcels that go into a hidden safe until a late-night pickup. Bob just keeps his head down and pours drinks, while Marv handles the money and grumbles, still embittered that the establishment bearing his name no longer belongs to him. Unbeknownst to Bob, Marv schemes to hold up the place and get his due by hiring some inexperienced thugs. And while the robbers only make off with $5,000 from the register in the practice round, crime boss Chavka, Michael Aronov, wants his money back. As Marv and Bob sweat about paying back the Chechens, Lehane's story veers into Bob's life. He's the kind of guy who goes to Mass every Sunday but never takes communion out of some distant, hidden guilt. One night on the way home, he finds a pit bull puppy someone has horribly beaten and dumped in a garbage can. Nadia, Rapace, the owner of said can, knows nothing about it and, having worked at an animal shelter, helps Bob get his bearings as a new pet owner. In his awkward, shy exchanges with Nadia and the animal, we see the obvious connection between Bob and his newfound friends, all of them scarred and desperately in need of someone they can trust. Bob remains a puppy dog, honorable and compassionate, while Nadia might represent his sole hope for redemption. Unfortunately, local creeper Eric Deeds, Schoenaerts, begins hanging around Bob, claiming the pup, now named Rocco, belongs to him, and so does Nadia for that matter. Meanwhile, Detective Torres, John Ortiz, who recognizes Bob from church, tries to piece together how the robbery of Cousin Marv's and an age-old murder that's long been linked to Deeds are connected. And Marv plans another robbery of his bar, this time on a drop night. As these seemingly separate pieces of the narrative converge with Bob's puppy thread in a violent yet oddly funny climax, Bob grows into a richly complicated and underestimated character, almost to the extent of myth-making. At one point, when the $5,000 is anonymously returned to Cousin Marv's along with a robber's severed arm, Bob maintains his cool as he wraps it up for disposal, hardly rattled by the sight. Such clues into Bob's elusive past, such as his former days in Marv's crew, slowly build into an overwhelmingly satisfying finale, despite the film's overt use of a puppy to sway our sympathies. But then, without Lahane's corny original title, the film's themes become less underscored and quite endearing. Never confiding in anyone in content that a person's past is their own business, Bob is a fascinating mystery in Hardy's hands and not unlike a pit bull, capable of violence and maybe even best avoided, but a devoted companion if treated well. In that respect, perhaps the Nadia character seems underdeveloped, though she, too, is a wounded animal in need of rescue. Further exploring how she and Bob find and need each other could have built upon the picture's light romantic elements, but the drop's gritty crime base prevails, presenting Bob as an intricate enigma whose dimensions are carefully preserved in Hardy's performance, which will only be better appreciated in subsequent viewings. And as much as this critic would like to say that Gandolfini's final farewell is a show stealer, his performance finds a perfect equilibrium with his co-stars and reminds us how, despite appearances and his iconic roles in the past, Gandolfini could measure his own presence. Overall, Roskam avoids oversaturating the film's themes and achieves a solid balance between its powerful performances and involving narrative. It's been quite some time since I've personally experienced a movie where the material has been elevated so much by a singular full-bodied performance. In a tale that feels like it lives in a world we've been privy to countless times before, here being the working-class neighborhood of Brooklyn, The Drop becomes an unpredictable and intriguing package of pent-up secrecy thanks to another standout Tom Hardy performance. Masking his short-statured, yet physically commanding appearance under a raft of dirty worn and ski jackets and turtlenecks, a Brooklyn-accented Hardy delivers one of his most outwardly mild yet internally layered turns as the anything-but simplistic barman Bob Sajanowski. Bob is the heart and soul of The Drop and a creation by writer Dennis Lehane, in his first screenplay, that allows Hardy to develop an at first glance easy-to-read everyman that becomes something else entirely as the film's narrative progresses. To give more away about Bob and his mindset would be a disservice to a film that utterly relies on Hardy's unmissable embodiment to survive as an entertaining film. Belgium-born director Michaël Roskam, in his first English-language feature, does an amiable job behind the camera that sees him capture the colds of Brooklyn streets in a fresh and interesting manner, but The Drop doesn't feel like the event it could have been thanks to some pedestrian pacing and otherwise unnoteworthy acting turns. This was, as many know, James Gandolfini's last acting turn, and sadly it's not much of a turn, in what really is a more subdued version of his Tony Soprano character, while Sweden's Noomi Rapace continues her long line of ill-informed Hollywood roles that in my mind has seen her become one of the most frustrating and irritating on-screen leading ladies in some time. Her Nadia is an unlikable and deterring presence on the film, while fellow European recruit Matthias Schoenaerts sadly doesn't fare much better. It is however nice to see Australian expat and Animal Kingdom breakout star James Frecheville in a small but important role. Where The Drop finds an element to match Hardy's standing is in some of its finely crafted dialogue and plot developments, that for anyone familiar with Lahane's work will realize are perfectly suited to his narrative tics, even though some twee elements such as Rocco the dog feel slightly misjudged. As a fan of cinema for as many years as I'd care to remember, I must admit to being quite assured of my picking up of characters and what to expect from their behavior and story, so it's with great joy that I can talk about The Drop being a film that blindsided me for the better part of its runtime, and that is right down to the fact that once more I, along with many others, am lucky enough to have bared witness to another expertly crafted Tom Hardy turn. Hardy is an actor that works on another level entirely to those that work alongside him, and The Drop is elevated from its pedestrian-like roots to something much more memorable thanks to his Bob Sajanowski, the man that no one sees coming. There are some sins that you commit that you can't come back from. Articulated by Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, this line could be applied to each of the characters in Michaël Roskam's The Drop. Set in Brooklyn, the film is based on Dennis Lehane's short story Animal Rescue. Bob's cousin Marv, James Gandolfini, runs the busiest bar in town, which we're informed is often utilized as a drop bar, a place where the money exchanged around town finds a final keeping place. Essentially, it's money you wouldn't steal, because you'd have not only Marv, but the most dangerous people in town to deal with. So when the bar is robbed at gunpoint, and their money is stolen, it unlocks a world that seemingly only seasoned inhabitants could survive. To further bloat Bob's accountabilities, he finds a severely wounded puppy in a garbage can in the front yard of Nadia, Noomi Rapace. She has no knowledge of the dog's presence on her property, and eventually leaves Bob in charge of caring for the injured animal. The two forge a bond over this responsibility, and the viewer is invited to find parallels between the circumstances surrounding the dog's ownership and the blossoming relationship between Bob and Nadia. To discuss the strengths in this film, one must first look to the performances by not only the lead actors, but those in supporting roles too. Hardy is brilliant as Bob. He manages to give such nuance and gravity to a character that isn't without its flaws. He continues to prove that he is one of Hollywood's most compelling players, and appears to thrive opposite Gandolfini's genius. In his final on-screen performance, Gandolfini perfectly embodies the life of a character that is past his prime, yet still yearns for the power and respect that is synonymous with a life of crime. Rapace is perfect in the role of Nadia. She is able to oscillate seamlessly between being vulnerable to being tough within the same scene, and displays the right amount of vulnerability without being too predictable. Her scenes with the mysterious Eric Deeds, Matthias Schoenaerts, are particularly amusing. Australian actor James Fresheville and John Ortiz are great in their supporting roles also, and contribute to the overall value of the film. Lehane, who wrote the screenplay as well as the short story on which the film is based, also penned the novels Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone, and Shutter Island. Each of these titles have been adapted to film by Clint Eastwood, Ben Affleck, and Martin Scorsese respectively, and they all share elements of noir that place particular emphasis on character and morality. As well as this, the role of location is integral to the overall mood of the film. Brooklyn serves as the perfect location for the drop, with its snow-covered and desolate backstreets providing the perfect landscape for the events that transpire. The music underscoring the film demonstrates the perfect amount of restraint, which complements the moody ambience of the film. With an Oscar nomination already under his belt for Best Foreign Film, Bullhead, 2011, Roskam has created a film that showcases his propensity for subject matter that sheds light on the human condition. With The Drop, he manages to breathe new life into a story that may seem familiar, but is strengthened by a stellar cast and superior direction. Overall, The Drop is an excellent film, with its strengths stemming from the performances and Roskam's understated direction. If you enjoy a good crime caper, this one is for you. Is Drop the worst date-night movie to hit theaters, or one of the best? That's the question I found myself asking as I walked out of the theater. On the surface, it has everything you want in a date film: two attractive leads, a trendy restaurant setting with a killer menu, a tense, if not romantic vibe, and a ticking clock thriller plot. Underneath all of that is something a bit darker, something I wasn't prepared for, and something I think some people need to know about before they buy a ticket, and I am not just talking about the things in the plot that work and those that fail, but we'll get into that. 2.so, Drop, what's this romantic, date night thriller about? It stars Megan Fahey as Violet, a widowed mother who's finally stepping back into the dating world. Brendan Sklenar plays her date Henry, a handsome, charming, and genuinely likable guy who has his own secrets. After 3 months of talking online, the two finally agree to meet at a high-rise restaurant, ready for a quiet, romantic evening. However, as the night unfolds, Violet starts receiving strange text messages through a peer-to-peer app called Drop. At first, they're just annoying texts. Then they become threatening, making it clear that if she doesn't follow the instructions, step by step, the masked man in her house will kill her sister and her son. The most clever thing about the film is the technology and how the bad guy was able to pair Violet's phone to keep her on a digital leash. It's a tight premise with a very familiar story structure that plays on the fear of invasion and the illusion of digital safety. The restaurant becomes a small, confined setting that's perfect for a thriller like Drop to heighten the tension and is in line with films like Phone Booth and Speed. Like those movies, Drop follow that same formula with a character trapped in a situation beyond their control, manipulated by a mysterious stranger, and forced to choose between morality and survival. Despite some flaws, there are things in the film that work. For instance, casting Megan Fahey and Brendan Sklenar was a good move, especially for a date night film because they have great on-screen chemistry. Their energy on screen, either together or separately, is strong enough to carry the movie, especially during the early, flirtier scenes before things go sideways. The restaurant environment is also well done. It has a real sense of liveliness to it, and the mix of patrons is well chosen, from annoying barflies to awkward first dates and overconfident lounge lizard. It captures that emotional mix you get when you're trying to connect with someone new in a public space that's full of strangers and distractions, which makes it the perfect setting since everyone seems like they could be the mysterious stranger responsible for Violet's terror drops. That said, it's also too much. Every single character is a caricature of the type of person they represent, from the obnoxious and weird to the overly dramatic and self-absorbed. Worse, the waiter feels like he's practicing for his improv night instead of doing his job, but it is funny when he crawls out from under a table. The tension would have hit harder if a few of these people had just been so. Now, let's talk tech, which is always my favorite part of any movie. I really liked how they used the Drop app because it felt real and plausible, under the right circumstances. In the film, Violet receives a game-like invitation that pops up with accept or decline options, but that kind of message wouldn't just appear out of the blue. Her phone was either already compromised through a malicious link she tapped, a vulnerable Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connection, or through government-level spyware like Pegasus, and that kind of surveillance software is incredibly difficult to obtain. In any case, it illustrates how easy it is to never know if or when your phone is compromised. Given the fact that the bad guy was also able to break into another person's phone in the restaurant, it seems like he was using spyware. So, yes, this aspect of the film taps into real fears about privacy and surveillance. Your phone isn't safe. If it's on, a bad actor can absolutely find a way in, and that part of the plot is scary, relevant, and well done. However, while the setup for the plot is solid, the execution gets sloppy. Violet misses obvious opportunities to signal for help, as well as some obvious options that didn't work out. Also, Henry should have picked up on how bizarrely she was acting. She's suddenly distracted, lying, looking over her shoulder constantly, and glued to her phone. If your date is acting like they're in a horror movie and is saying they're fine with a forced smile, and you know someone is sending her upsetting text messages, maybe take some initiative, like making an excuse to get outside of the 50-foot radius and call the cops because she was clearly freaking out about her son. There's even a moment where she kisses Henry to keep him from leaving, per instructions from the bad guy, and it's the perfect time to whisper, "Someone's in my house, I'm being watched, call the cops." But, no. She missed that easy answer. Worse, if you are on a date and you get a weird text message. Just turn off your phone. I get the whole thing about wanting to be reachable because of her son, but she can always turn on her phone later and make a call, and her sister knows where she is and can call the restaurant in the case of an emergency. However, if she did that, I guess we wouldn't have a movie. So, instead of smart moves, we get panic moves. Then there's the twist with the SIM card in Henry's camera. He's a photographer, and the bad guy wants her to destroy the SIM to stop him from turning over evidence. Okay, but why is the card still in the camera? How does the bad guy know that is where the SIM card with the evidence is stored? If it's that important, wouldn't Henry have already handed it over to the authorities since he is a witness for an important case? Or why not hide it or put it in his wallet so that it is always with him all the time? The logic doesn't hold. Even with its flaws, the thing that really kills me is the plot hole big enough for the bad guy to fall through, and then he literally does. I get it, it's a movie, and I'm willing to suspend disbelief, but the physics in the climax just don't work. Skyscrapers aren't pressurized like airplanes, and the natural airflow and wind outside aren't nearly strong enough to blow out a window. Even after taking 2 bullets and spider webbing, there's no realistic reason the window would explode outward with such force that it sucks someone through it. That's not how the stack effect works, not even in the Burj Khalifa, which the tallest building in the world at 828 meters, and the skyscraper in Drop was not the Burj Khalifa. Sure, having the glass shatter is dramatic. Maybe the villain could have tripped and fallen out the window, if it's windy, which didn't happen because he got sucked out, but having Violet get sucked out too made no sense, except that the film clearly wanted a big moment for Henry or someone to step in and save her. So, okay, fine. Still, I could have forgiven a lot of those plot holes because they did add some interesting and exciting moments, if that were the worst problem. But it's not. Here's where I need to be real with you about the biggest issue in this film. When I walked into Drop, I expected a fun date night thriller, something with a little danger, some chemistry, maybe a few twists. What I didn't expect was the domestic violence storyline. It's not in the trailer or the movie description. But right in the opening scene, we see Violet being physically beaten, and through flashbacks, it becomes clear this was her husband. There's also an implication of sexual abuse. For someone like me, a survivor, that kind of content can't just be brushed aside without some kind of heads up. I held it together in the theater, but when I walked to my car alone afterward, my heart was pounding. I was triggered. When I started writing this review, I realized it had hit my fight or flight response, and when I get triggered, I get angry. This movie caught me off guard, and I'm not asking for hand-holding or sappy video warnings at the start of the film, but a simple heads-up in the description would have made a huge difference. So, here's what I need to say to the studios: this isn't okay. You have a responsibility to your audience, especially when you're marketing a film like Drop as a date night thriller aimed at women and men who want to take those women out on a date. If you're going to center part of the story around abuse and trauma, say that somewhere in your materials. Give a woman the chance to decide whether she's ready for it, or give her a chance to get ready for it, because if I had been on a date, this film would have ruined the night because I went in blind, and I'm not the only one who will feel this way. What makes it worse is that this subplot wasn't even necessary. Violet didn't need to be a victim of abuse to make the story work. She could have been a single mom who lost her husband in an accident or a widow just starting to date again. But instead, the filmmakers use trauma as shorthand for depth of character, and that's just lazy. Thanks to 20th Century Fox, we had the chance to see The Drop before its national release. This is our review of the movie, but as usual, no matter what we say, we still recommend you to go and see it at your local cinema because there is no better critic than yourself. Bob, Tom Hardy, is a quiet but loyal bartender who's working in the bar of his cousin Marv, James Gandolfini, a place which also doubles as a drop bar, where all the mobster money from the whole area is stored. When Bob finds a wounded pit bull puppy in the trash, he develops a friendship with Nadia, Noomi Rapace, in whose front yard he discovered the dog. Things turn ugly when the aggressive Eric Deeds, Matthias Schoenaerts, shows up. Deeds brags about how he killed a loyal local of Cousin Marv's bar, and he's not afraid to threaten Bob as well. All too often European art house directors who get the chance to make a movie in the US end up seeing their dreams squashed by producers who insist they make their film more middle of the road. But Belgian director Michaël Roskam and his mainly European cast have delivered a movie that not only looks and feels like a true American crime film, they have done such a great job that this adaptation of a Dennis Lehane story is easily as good as the previous 3 movies based on his novels. And that is quite a big call, considering these 3 movies were Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone and Shutter Island. An European director who gets to make his second ever film in America and already holds his own in comparison to Clint Eastwood, Ben Affleck and Martin Scorsese, that is just unheard of. The achievement is even greater considering Roskam's debut film Bullhead was actually a rather nasty and inaccessible film that mainly gained global attention due to the intimidating tour de force of lead actor Matthias Schoenaerts. The great story by Dennis Lehane and the terrific directing by Roskam aside, The Drop really is an actor's film. Just looking at the poster alone with those 4 names creates unreasonably high expectations: Baines/Bronson, Bullhead, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Tony Soprano all in one film? Rarely ever have we seen such a collection of tough character actors in one movie. It almost reads like the Expendables of gritty art house. Yet the 4 heavyweight actors live up to the expectations while all giving each other plenty of space to shine. Tom Hardy gets the chance to show a more vulnerable side in the lead role as brooding bartender Bob, while Rapace reveals a softer side as the damaged Nadia. Schoenaerts is magnificently menacing yet again, and it is only a matter of time before this Belgian badass will become just as much of a household name as his fellow leads. But of course The Drop will mainly be known as James Gandolfini's last film, and to have such a gritty crime drama as his swan song is most befitting for the man who is best known for his role as legendary mobster Tony Soprano. Roskam sends him off in style. Michaël Roskam's 2011 feature Bullhead was bold, proactive, and powerfully original. It was a thoughtful meditation on masculinity as it relates to both sexuality and violence. Sadly, his follow-up, The Drop, is a shrug of a picture that lacks any vibrancy whatsoever. The movie seems to coast on being a Dennis Lehane scripted, working-class crime picture led by talented actors. There's barely anything beneath its stolid surface. The film is too meager to offend or excite in any manner. At most, it's an odd whimper of a crime thriller where the most engaging aspect is Tom Hardy playing with a puppy. Bob Hardy works as a bartender for his cousin Marv, James Gandolfini, at a Brooklyn bar that also functions as a drop bar, which means it serves as a holding location for dirty money. Walking home from the bar one night, Bob discovers an injured puppy in a trash can and gets the help of a neighbor, Nadia, Noomi Rapace, to nurse the dog back to health. However, the couple and their dog are under the eye of local thug Eric Deeds, Matthias Schoenaerts. Meanwhile, back at the bar, Bob and Marv are robbed at gunpoint and are tasked with recovering the money, even though the robbery may be a setup for a larger score. As a dog person, I don't know if it was possible for any plotline to take precedence over. I hope the dog is okay, but it doesn't help that the crime story, ostensibly the main plot, is dreadfully uninteresting. Even after the money is stolen, there doesn't seem to be much urgency in getting it back, and the machinations behind the robbery are flat. It's a sad state of affairs when a story involving stolen mob money is so deflated that the movie needs a subplot involving a random thug threatening to repo a dog. Lehane does tie the two plots together, but it's done in an almost laughably forced manner. Roskam tries to play the movie like a slow boil and let his cast carry the day, but Bob is so meek that his dullness feels at odds with the supporting characters who are always on edge. Nothing really phases Bob, and while his gentle demeanor is strangely charming, it makes him a bland protagonist. Near the end of the picture, the character becomes exciting, but it feels more like a function of having a big reveal rather than coming about organically. The movie's shambling nature runs to the end credits as the drop cycles through 3 different endings in the hopes of finding a grace note to a picture that never had much of a tune. The drop is about as deep as a trailer or poster. It's an idea of a movie with a wisp of an execution. It's brazenly mediocre in almost every single way. It's a movie that's worth watching if you're on one of those older airplanes that doesn't let you choose the programming. Or you could just enjoy this pictured. I am a big sucker for a good crime story. If something, movie/TV/games, with a crime story looks interesting to me. So then I found out that there was a movie that was a crime story written by Dennis Lehane, author of books like Shutter Island and Mystic River. So of course I got pretty excited. Now I have finally seen it and I am ready to talk about it. The drop is about Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, who works at a bar with his cousin Marv, James Gandolfini, R.I.P. But this isn't a regular bar, oh no. It is a so-called drop bar that sort of funnels cash around to different mobsters. But one night the place gets robbed and shit starts going downhill. I thought the plot was great. The reason I didn't say too much is because it is best experienced. It is a really good plot with a few twists here and there. There is also a sort of subplot on the side with Bob finding a dog in a trash can and befriending a woman named Nadia, Noomi Rapace. And that works too. I liked it. The only problem I have with the plot is that the main stuff takes a while to get started. Not bringing the movie down too much, but it still ticks me off a little. The characters in this movie are well written and spectacularly acted. Bob, for instance, may seem like a calm person who wouldn't hurt a fly, but believe me when I say he got tons and tons of rage built up inside of him that you don't want to experience. Tom Hardy portrays him perfectly. James Gandolfini is also great as this guy, Marv. I mean, he is James Gandolfini. Noomi Rapace is also great as this woman who Hardy's character befriends. The characters are all great. Even though I cannot for the life of me find the composer for the OST of the movie, I can still say that I really like it. It reminds me in a lot of ways of the soundtracks by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, Cold and Slow. They all help build a suspenseful atmosphere in the movie that stayed with me throughout. The choices for the licensed tracks were good too. Even though I am a big fan of Dennis Lehane, I was a little worried going into the movie. Last time I saw a movie with a screenplay by an acclaimed author was when Cormac McCarthy, No Country for Old Men, wrote the screenplay for the terrible The Counselor. Thankfully, the screenplay and overall writing in the movie is terrific. I am going to be completely honest, every time someone opened their mouth I was very interested. Everything they said was great. This movie was also terrifically shot. This movie is directed by Michaël Roskam, who made the Oscar-nominated foreign film Bullhead. Every shot looks great, the framing is great, everything relating to the direction and camera work in this movie was great. Fans of Lahane's pungent Boston crime fiction may be a bit surprised that the scribe has relocated his Dorchester set short story Animal Rescue, the film's original title, to Brooklyn for the purposes of the film, though under the smooth direction of Belgian filmmaker Michaël Roskam, Bullhead, there's no major loss in seedy atmosphere. As Hardy's happily infrequent voiceover informs us at the outset, the borough is home to any number of drinking establishments that double as drop bars, places where, on very rare nights, large quantities of dirty money can exchange hands away from the prying eyes of the police. Manning the counter at Cousin Marv's is Bob Sajanowski, Hardy, a soft-spoken, hard-working type who likes to keep his head down, while Marv himself, Gandolfini, tends to the shadier dealings at the behest of Chavka, Michael Aronov, the Chechen crime lord who owns the bar. That Bob dutifully attends mass every morning but abstains from taking communion is an early clue that there's more to this gruff but likable heavy than meets the eye. Whatever it may be, Hardy does a fine job of keeping the audience guessing. All we can assume is that he's been scarred by some distant trauma, which may explain why he reacts with such fear and vulnerability when two masked robbers enter the bar and empty the register late one evening. Fortunately, it isn't a drop bar night, which means they've only lost $5,000. But it's still enough to piss off Chavka and his thugs, who order them to recover the money, a tricky proposition, as Bob or Cousin Marv would presumably have to be in cahoots with the robbers in order to do so. As that particular plot thickens, the film sets up a second narrative track in which Bob discovers a pit bull puppy in someone's garbage, brutally beaten and left for dead by its owner. With the help of an attractive neighbor, Nadia, Noomi Rapace, he nurses the dog back to health, his better judgment and inexperience with pets overcome by his genuine affection for the animal. Naturally, it's not long before Nadia and Bob also begin to get close, taking turns walking and looking after Rocco, as they call him. But Bob soon finds himself inexplicably stalked by the dog's original owner, Eric, Matthias Schoenaerts, an intimidating ne'er-do-well who takes a sadistic pleasure in harassing our hero at every opportunity. It's hard to remember the last time a canine was made so shamelessly pivotal a character in a mainstream movie, Marley and Me, perhaps, but the drop is at once upfront and highly effective in its manipulations, tugging at our heartstrings even as it flicks away at our nerves. Rocco is quite plainly a stand-in for Bob himself, a cute, defenseless, moist-eyed creature who can take only so much abuse before he finally snaps, and it's clear enough from the setup that Bob will eventually come into his own and become a righteous defender of the weak, rather than remaining one of the weak himself. Until then, however, the violence arrives from other quarters. Fittingly enough for this gangland genre territory, Roskam throws in the occasional impaled foot and severed limb for effect, but it all feels pretty tame and impersonal compared with the steroid injections and crushed testicles of Bullhead, his much more graphic study of tormented masculinity. The director has learned to economize, however, the drop clocks in at a welcome 106 minutes. Meanwhile, Hardy underplays to the point of passivity, lowering his gaze, speaking in a mumble, shying away from confrontation and delaying the moment of truth as long as possible without turning the viewer against him. While the climactic reversal is undeniably effective and darkly funny to boot, the drama can feel fairly creaky, even perplexing, during the build-up. The parallel narrative structure, cross-cutting between Bob's woes at work and his puppy love story at home, never seems especially organic, least of all when the two threads converge, and the drop essentially becomes a three-way showdown, pitting Bob against Marv against Eric, and leaving it to the viewer to decide which man has more dangerously underestimated the others. This is one case of the destination being more satisfying than the journey, even allowing for the generic requirements of a suspenseful action climax. The pieces don't snap satisfyingly into place as they should, and it's hard not to wonder if something crucial got distorted in the process of expanding Lahane's story into a feature. Slapping on a persuasive Noayak accent and eliminating all traces of the suavity he's displayed elsewhere, Hardy is so good here that it almost doesn't matter that Bob feels like a somewhat hollow construct in the end, engineered to stir the audience's compassion and their bloodlust simultaneously. In his English-language filmmaking debut, Roskam has pointedly cast both his countryman Schoenaerts, Bullhead, and Swedish actress Rapace, best known for the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo movie trilogy, neither of whom blends as seamlessly into the Brooklyn background as Hardy does, but who both prevail on the strength of their screen magnetism alone. Elsewhere, John Ortiz and Endowed round out the working-class environs with brief but effective turns as a nosy police detective and Marv's put-upon sister, respectively. Adding further flavor and texture are Marco Beltrami's lightly pulsing score and Nicholas Caracciani's moody lensing of Brooklyn locations, whether on an abandoned street where a bloody double-cross is afoot, or under the golden glow of the lamps at Cousin Marv's. As for Hardy's four-legged co-stars, three puppies, aged a few weeks apart, handle Rocco's thespian duties with predictably scene-stealing aplomb. Unsurprisingly, though, it's Gandolfini who offers the most invaluable support here, putting across Cousin Marv's cynicism and capacity for reckless violence in a few deft, understated strokes, certainly all that's needed from an actor whose iconic tough guy stature can hardly be overestimated. The drop may not be as moving or revelatory a final showcase for Gandolfini's talents as last year's Enough Said, but it's a fitting, well-played note to end on nonetheless. Much of this working-class Brooklyn tale covers familiar ground. Heavily accented, highly unpleasant gangsters, Chechen this time, have taken over the hood using intimidation, extortion and racketeering. People who irk them end up in bits in dripping bin bags. And an apparently ordinary schlub, seemingly none too bright, glimpses a better life within his grasp if he can extricate himself from crime, violence and dark history. Tom Hardy's quiet, kind-hearted Bob Sajanowski isn't entirely what he seems. He keeps his head down at the bar and takes out the trash, bullied by James Gandolfini's loudmouth Marv, a little lamentably, given it's his final performance, his default mode. Bob turns a blind eye when the Chechen's couriers furtively slip deposits, cash for laundering from illegal enterprises, under the bar. After the bar is raided by two masked characters with shotguns, both the peeped Chechens and the peaked cops take too close an interest in the joint, its denizens and the missing loot. This is very not good for Marv or Bob. Meanwhile, Bob rescues a battered puppy dog abandoned in a rubbish bin and bonds sweetly over its care with a nice, intriguing immigrant, Noomi Rapace Nadia. Belgian hotshot Michaël Roskam, who made a splash with Bullhead, makes his American debut with a strong cast, including Bullhead's Matthias Schoenaerts as a persistently nerve-wracking psycho who claims ownership of abused dog and abused woman, and a good instinct for suspense. Dennis Lehane, whose usual beat, Boston, gave us Mystic River and Gone Baby Gone, adapted the screenplay from his short story, Animal Rescue, and while he has fleshed it out with characters and subplots, these don't go anywhere particularly. It does feel stretched out, thinner than the episodes he wrote for The Wire. It's Hardy's deceptive, sympathetic performance that really distinguishes this from any number of competent but routine crime genre dramas. The Drop is a film with a tight cast of highly talented actors. Our main character, Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, a man whose world is fairly mundane, encounters a whimpering dog in a trash can. His interest in rescuing the dog provides a backdrop to the story. Bob works for Marv, James Gandolfini, a former bar owner turned mafia pawn. This film has some detective flavor, a decent amount of drama and a subtlety of color with repeating masculine themes. Nearly everyone has dark hair, and much of the film takes place under shadow and at night. It is visually compelling and contains an old-school, slower pace. The story has undoubtedly dark edges, and it grows darker in the minutes ahead. For its better points, the story is intellectually thoughtful and contemplative, a compelling thriller. However, it is all but bereft of edifying content, and it is demented enough to be adults only. The Drop contains just a few actual displays of violence, but there is much gruesome imagery, such as severed human body parts and connotations of greater violence throughout. This film contains extreme cursing throughout, more than 70 F-words and profanity. It has little to no sexual content. The Drop will get some acclaim for its well-told story. It has value there. This is a fairly strong piece of media. If you take it, I don't recommend taking it lightly. A subtle message underlies the story. I find what it tells about life to be empty and even betraying. The Drop is getting most of its buzz for being James Gandolfini's, Enough Said, Zero Dark 30, final film, but it's a good one, especially for the late actor in a sizable supporting role. Gandolfini's playing Cousin Marv, a former bar owner and two-bit criminal who has sold off his business to bigger fish who moved into the area several years back when he ended up owing them some money. Tom Hardy, Locke, The Dark Knight Rises, plays Marv's bartender and actual cousin, Bob Sajanowski, who is shown as kind of a dumb but loyal guy who finds a pit bull, a dumb but loyal dog, in the trash at the residence of a waitress named Nadia Rapace, Prometheus, with whom he forms an instant bond. Too bad that both the dog, whom is named Rocco soon after his rescue, and the girl may be damaged goods from the hands of the creep named Eric, Skunnerts, Rust and Bone, who won't leave Bob alone. We find that nothing's unrelated in this town, whose inhabitants crisscross each other in a variety of ways that has us question just who is loyal to whom. The setting is a fictional representation of Brooklyn in winter, one almost completely run by Chechen thugs who strong-arm most of the neighborhood businesses to be fronts for their illicit activities. Bars like Marv's are used as drops, where money owed to the criminals is delivered surreptitiously and picked up by people at designated times like clockwork. Trouble brews for Marv when a night's money is collected in an armed robbery. The crooks make off with $5,000 of money to go to the Chechens, and he's on the hook to find out who did it, or to pay it back. The Brooklyn of the Dropey is one that comes completely from the mind of noted crime author Dennis Lehane, author of the books that would be turned into the movies Shutter Island, Gone Baby Gone, and Mystic River, who also provides the adaptation, his first theatrically released effort, taken from his short story entitled Animal Rescue. The animal refers directly, of course, to Rocco, though it could apply to most of this cast of characters, who each have particular need of salvation. For years, Bob attends the soon-to-be closing Catholic church in the neighborhood, but never takes communion, showing his level of interest in things but never really feels motivated to become a part of it. Rocco, whom Bob names after seeing the visage of Saint Rocco, the patron saint of dogs, the sick, and falsely accused people, no coincidences there, is a rare addition to his life. Nadia has to give Bob every instruction on what to get to take care of a dog, because this is a man who seemingly has never wanted someone to be a part of his life either. Many of the thematic underpinnings of the movie have to do with possession. Everyone wants to own, but no one wants any responsibility, whether it's for a dog, a bar, or massive amounts of cash. They all want these things, but it's never in their best interest to have a direct claim, because then they are culpable if things go awry. Better to let someone else take care of it, but still reap the benefit of ownership when the situation is suitable. The Drop is directed by Michaël Roskam, Bullhead, an Oscar-nominated Belgian filmmaker helming for the first time in English. It's a very fine job from the director, but this is really an actor's showcase. Roskam is blessed with a solid cast up and down the line, despite the fact that few among the cast are New Yorkers, much less American. Nevertheless, they're all convincing, especially Hardy as the meek bartender who, like puppy dog Rocco, is sweet and gentle, but could mature into a dangerous sort of animal that pit bulls have the reputation to be, especially when put into the proper circumstances. If you're a fan of Gandolfini, of course, you'll want to catch this last hurrah, but I'd extend recommendations also to fans of Hardy, Lehane, and just slow-burn crime dramas with a flair for offbeat humor and punchy dialogue. Though there are moments when characters and conversation can seem a bit odd, there's a refreshing aspect to the way Lehane tells his tale, with appropriate motifs, themes, and foreshadowing, that shows he's an author in his element. It's all about abused, neglected, and abandoned souls in fiery hell hoping for a drop of water to quench their thirst, perpetually looking for someone who'll accept them, scars and all. The Drop is a film borne alone by performances rather than by story or visual gusto or sharp dialogue or anything else. The late James Gandolfini gives a very James Gandolfini-like turn as mobster-minded cousin Marv, which is to say that he's still an immensely enjoyable actor even in a typecast role. Tom Hardy stars as Bob Sajanowski, bartender at Marv's Place and occasional collaborator in things less legal. Marv's Place is a drop bar, where mafiosos and mafioso wannabes from across Brooklyn launder their dirty money on any given night. The Drop starts with a robbery of the bar, which leads to complications for Bob's otherwise straightforward life. Watching The Drop certainly isn't akin to watching paint dry, but for the first couple acts it's pretty close to watching Tom Hardy watch paint dry. Bob finds a battered puppy whimpering from a trash can outside a house near the bar and, damn near immediately starts a relationship with the girl who lives there, played by Noomi Rapace. A few double crosses later and the dog turns out to be one of the links in the robbery case, because of course it is. This predictability continues through to the very end when Bob is revealed to be a lot less timid than he appears, because of course he is. Hardy, as usual, is commanding. So Bob's character is predictable, yes, predictably one of those potential secret-holding phantom menaces from movies like A History of Violence, but it works in the Drop's favor that Hardy plays that type of character so well. He's more fascinating as the simmering powder keg than as the explosion, more spellbinding as the lion in the cage, which is exactly what Bob appears to be and indeed does end up being at the end. Granted, Hardy is phenomenal when playing characters that are fully unleashed, as in Bronson, and fully restrained, as in Locke, but Bob Sajanowski isn't written anywhere near as well as Hardy's most memorable characters. It's Hardy holding the screen, not Bob. Gandolfini, likewise, is playing a snapshot of Tony Soprano but playing it well. Dennis Lehane has written some great crime novels that have been translated to successful films like Mystic River, and The Drop certainly has a streetwise vibe about it. He fails to do anything besides check the major boxes, though, and it's the actors who have to make up for the inevitable sluggishness one experiences when retrotting familiar material. The Drop is worth watching if you're sick of your Netflix queue, if you're bored on a transnational flight, or if you just enjoy Hardy and or Gandolfini. There's little doubt that you will enjoy them here, but past that, The Drop is hard-pressed to offer anything else. The Drop is a perfectly serviceable crime movie, and a good showcase for its stars' talents, but doesn't amount to much more than that. Things aren't predictable really, but they aren't surprising either. The film is good, but definitely not great. You'll come out of it with a positive experience, but it's not one you'll be dying to repeat anytime soon. Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, is a Brooklyn bartender who works with his cousin Marv, James Gandolfini. Normally, they just run a bar, but ever since Marv lost the bar a few years prior to the story's start, they also have to serve as a drop bar for the Chechen mafia. One night, their bar is robbed, which is bad for them and also the people that robbed it. The mob gives them a limited time to get the money, implying that Marv and Bob set the whole thing up. Meanwhile, Bob becomes involved with a bit of trouble involving the local psychopath, Eric Deeds, Matthias Schoenaerts, rumored to have killed a young man years earlier. Deeds believes Bob has stolen his dog Rocco and his ex-girlfriend Nadia, Noomi Rapace, and stalks Bob and makes demands of him in order to get them back. The subplot with Bob and his new best friend, the dog, is very heartwarming and hands down the best part of the movie. It offers a lot of insight into Bob's character, and the dog is also really adorable. At the beginning of the story, Bob appears to be someone who is content to mind his own business and not get involved, but the whole time we sense that there is something more to him. While he tries to appear if he is neutral in just about every situation, that is simply not the case. In reality, he falls at either extreme, reacting to things with immense kindness or hostility. It's interesting to see his character reveal more as the story goes on, both in his interactions with the dog and Nadia and with the psychopath Deeds. It's significant that the dog is a pit bull. Rocco has a strong capability for violence but most of the time seems completely lovable. Unfortunately, I've just about summed up all the good stuff about this movie. It's nice and very bittersweet to see James Gandolfini's final screen performance here. He does a good job, but his performance, like the movie itself, is nothing groundbreaking or anything. The film can also get a bit heavy-handed with the foreshadowing. It's not too hard to guess the mysteries of Bob's character fairly earlier on in the film. We don't know specifics, but there's one scene in particular involving a severed arm that shows us Bob is not as mellow and neutral as he seems to be. And we also have a line from Gandolfini just in case we couldn't figure this out for ourselves. Other unnecessary things include John Ortiz's character, an actor I enjoy but one who didn't need to be here. In one way he did, because if a cop didn't get involved at some point it would be strange, but we really didn't need him telling us things everyone else in the story had figured out a while ago. The film, overall, is pretty good. It's just not remarkable, and it's hard to find things to say about it for this reason. There were a couple of things that bothered me, but they were all really minor and any of them on their own wouldn't detract from the overall experience. I suppose having all of these things in one movie just dragged it down a bit too much. I wouldn't recommend rushing out to the theater to catch this one, but if you are ever in the need to rent something or catch this on cable, it's worth a look. Are you a fan of movies where pretty much everyone is haunted by the decisions they've made in life? Are you okay with the constant threat of what some may deem slightly graphic violence? I might not deem it too graphic, but I see a lot of movies. And do you enjoy Tom Hardy playing a stoic, soft-spoken man who you just know is going to do a bad thing to someone at some point? Well, then I think The Drop is going to be right up your alley. The script is based on a short story, both written by Dennis Lehane. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he wrote Mystic River and Gone Baby Gone. Hell, if you really want a doozy of an interesting movie marathon, try those two along with The Drop and see if your urge to down a few shots of whiskey and sleep with a gun under your pillow rises to unhealthy levels. Needless to say, Lehane deals in some dark stuff, but he always manages to weave a sense of morality into the awful acts so many of the characters perform. Sure, it's basically street justice, but there's an admirable searching for redemption element that comes through in all of his scripts, and somehow you find yourself rooting at times for people you wouldn't want to live in your neighborhood, let alone have a casual drink with at the bar during Monday Night Football. Look, I had forgotten I saw the trailer for this movie months ago and only saw fit to check it out because of my high esteem for the actors, Tom Hardy, Noomi Rapace, and James Gandolfini. Seriously, that's worth the price of admission on its own. Learning that the project came from the virtual typewriter of Lehane only sweetens the pot. As expected, the acting is spot on. Every character, no matter how significant, serves a purpose and is given a genuine quality by the actors that root the film in a tangible, albeit seedy, environment that both captivates and repulses you at the same time. Hardy and Gandolfini have done similar work before but are so fit for the task that it's simply a joy to watch them. Rapace also treads on some familiar ground, but she has such a great capacity to exhibit both fierceness and vulnerability, all in the same beat. It's truly astounding. Now, I don't think this movie is quite for everyone. It's a crime drama, with only Rapace and a cute pit bull puppy as elements of the film one might truly describe as likable. Sure, you want someone like Hardy to be your friend, but the balancing act his character performs throughout the movie is that beautiful mix of virtuous, dangerous, and unpredictable that makes watching films like this such fun for those of us who enjoy the genre. It just may be a bit too much for people who want a more black and white definition of good and bad. Their loss, I say. Transplanted from the Dorchester setting of Dennis Lehane's short story Animal Rescue, The Drop plays out on the fringes of New York City, in the heart of old-school, pre-cool Brooklyn, the domain of dive bars, unkempt backyards, and single-family houses. Despite an introductory shot which sets the underworld-focused tone, with the inverted underside of the Manhattan Bridge reflected in the murky surface of a puddle, the film emphasizes the everyday nature of its location, in which keeping mum about illegal neighborhood business is only one of many tribal codes governing this tight-knit, family-oriented milieu. None of this is a problem for simple bartender Bob Sajanowski, Tom Hardy, who's not one to question the way things are, living sparsely in a house passed down from his deceased parents, old plastic coatings still clinging to the vintage furniture. While some parts of this world have inevitably changed, namely the intrusion of brutally efficient Chechen immigrants in the organized crime circuit and the gradual conversion of the neighborhood cathedral into condos, the past lives on in the profusion of hand-me-down objects and old-fashioned characters. The titular drop is itself a quaintly traditional bit of business, in which mob-controlled bars are selected on a rotational basis to collect an entire borough's worth of dirty money, transferred briefly into a secure lockbox, with the gangsters arriving at the end of the night to pick up the haul. In a different movie this might feel like the silly stuff of expansive criminal conspiracies, but in keeping with its overall homespun feel, The Drop keeps things intimate, cataloging a steady accretion of small cash envelopes. Much of the film takes place in one of these drop bars, a cozy watering hole run by cousin Marv, James Gandolfini, whose name on the front adds to the overall family feel. Marv himself isn't particularly avuncular, once something of a local heavy, he now labors in grumpy servitude under the Chechens, who took control of his bar after a short struggle 8 years earlier. Marv's dissatisfaction progresses to something more acute when the bar is suspiciously robbed on one of its nights serving as The Drop, losing $5,000 of mob money which Marv and his trusty bartender are expected to recover themselves. This is one of many challenges for the quiet, impassive Bob, who's also dealing with the adoption of an abused puppy, an equally damaged love interest, Noomi Rapace, and the aggressive advances of a local thug with ties to both, Matthias Schoenaerts. These elements are all incorporated within the pulpy narrative, which unfolds with satisfying precision, anchored by a well-constructed script from veteran novelist Lehane, stylish direction from Belgian import Michaël Roskam, and strong performances all around. A standard gangster story on its surface, The Drop patiently develops some interesting ideas as it progresses, minimizing the focus on money and playing up the concept of a gangster demi-monde fueled primarily by insecurity, with pointless squabbles over reputation and petty personal grudges keeping the cycle of violence flowing. All this leads up to a suitably nasty conclusion, which both expands and explains the grim pall of Catholic guilt that's been looming throughout. But the film unfortunately gets greedy with an oddly optimistic capper, making room for sunshine and bright flowers in a movie that's been identified almost exclusively by frost and darkness. It's a nice last moment for some hard-luck characters, but it's also a complete violation of the preceding final twist, which swaps out earlier notions of masculine insecurity for a chilling final statement on the banality of evil. By offering last-minute salvation to a character who seems to have accepted his own cursed status, the film muddies its previous statements regarding the danger of unthinkingly hanging on to totems of the past, be it plastic-coated furniture, fading tough guy status, or tribal notions of heroic aggression, and how such blind adherence perpetuates toxic systems of violence. Robbed of this idea, The Drop becomes something far more ordinary, another story of hard men doing terrible things to one another for very little reason. This film, directed by Michael R. Roskam. Written by Dennis Lehane. Based on Animal Rescue. Produced by Peter Chernin. Starring Tom Hardy. Cinematography Nicholas Karakatsanis. Edited by Christopher Tellefson. Music by Marco Beltrami. Production company Chernin Entertainment. Distributed by Fox Searchlight Pictures. Release date September 12, 2014. Running time 106 minutes. Country United States. Language English. Budget $12.6 million. Box office $18.9 million.